what we know about the pandemic is that there's been a tremendous amount of job loss for women generally, Black women specifically. They work in a lot of jobs that had been deemed essential. So on the one hand, they're essential jobs, but they're low-paid jobs.
So over half of Black women say that they're frequently the only person of their gender or race in a room.
8 months. That's how much longer a Black woman has to work to make the same amount of money as a white man.
And the rates of racial disparities in stops for women are the same as they are for men, but we never were able to get that into the center of the conversation.
About 700 women die each year in the U.S. due to pregnancy or delivery complications, and African American mothers are 4 times more likely to be victims than white women. Dr. Valerie Montgomery Rice says the causes of racial disparity aren't fully known.
I definitely think that there is a level of unconscious and conscious bias that occurs in medical settings.
2 years ago, the CDC issued a report on female murder victims. The numbers were shocking. It showed more than half, 55%, died as a result of domestic abuse, primarily from their male partners. Black and Native American women were killed at a rate that was 2.5 times that of white or Asian women.
The most disrespected person in America is the Black woman. The most unprotected person in America is the Black woman. The most neglected person in America is the Black woman.
Welcome, everybody. You are joining us for Knowledge Cypher. Today, we are talking about the unconquerable nature of the Black woman. We are going to be discussing the trials and tribulations and triumphs and achievements of the Black woman. Today, I am hosting for you all. My name is Professor Taylor Curtis. I am a professor of psychology at Sinclair Community College, where I teach general psychology, social psychology, and Black psychology. I am also the director of Black Studies at Sinclair Community College, and I am so grateful to be here. This is definitely a conversation that I enjoy having, especially as the youngest Black female tenured in United States history. I have certainly had the experiences and the triumphs and trials and tribulations of a Black woman, and I'm so grateful to be joined today with some amazing members of the community and professionals who want to share some of their experiences and expertise with us today. So I'm going to introduce our panel. Today we have Miss Ashley Wormley, and I'm going to allow her to introduce herself and share a little bit about her background.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Taylor. My name is Ashley Wormley. I am a licensed professional clinical counselor. I am the founder and therapist for Loving Self-Counseling Services. The purpose of Loving Self-Counseling Services is to uplift the Black community as a whole. As we know, Black people in general are just now coming into terms with what mental health is and the struggles that are associated with mental health. So Loving Self-Counseling Services is here to help.
Thank you so much, Ashley. We're so glad that you're here with us. We're also going to bring to our panel the owner of Rise Counseling Group, Dianetics Thompson. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening. Thank you for having me. My name is Dianetics Thompson. I'm a licensed independent social worker supervisor here in the state of Ohio, and I'm a licensed clinical social in the state of Tennessee. And as Professor Taylor said, I am the owner of Rise Counseling Group, where we focus on alleviating depression and anxiety in Black women and other women of color. And I am grateful to be here today. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We are so glad that you're here today. And we would be remiss to leave out a male perspective in this conversation. So last but certainly not least, we want to introduce Brother Kevin-Jamal Muhammad, who is joining us. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum, family, sisters, and I'm glad to be on the panel. My name is Kevin-Jamal Muhammad. I am what we call a counselor assistant, CDCA, and I've been doing work with veterans, both male and female, coming back from war. And also, just dealing with the Black community, a lot of contract work, and, dealing with mental illness in our community is a serious issue in the Black community we've been dealing with for the last 17 years. So we're kind of glad that this panel and the members of our community are now finally waking up to address the issue of Black mental illness in our community. I think for so long we talk about physical, but it's great to see we talk about mental illness. And then the role of what the Black woman's been through throughout our society, you know, just being a member of the Nation of Islam, to find out that it's good to address it today.
Absolutely. Well, we are certainly glad that all of you are here. We're looking forward to this conversation because I know how powerful it's going to be. Just the idea of a knowledge cipher in itself is just a beautiful thing to me as a musician and a singer. Ciphers get me excited. Like, okay, we're going to share some deep stuff here. And so I'm very much so looking forward to this. We're going to start the conversation today talking about what the pandemic has revealed about the condition of Black women in our society today. And we can talk about many different aspects of that, from the issues with unemployment and the wealth gap, not only the racial wealth gap, but the wealth gap for women, and then add the intersectionality of that, to some of the healthcare issues and the experiences of women in healthcare, to the strain on relationships, especially during this quarantine season, and domestic violence, and, you know, so many other things, onto the racial traumas that we've all experienced in the past year, especially with the death of Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, Elijah McClain, and many others. And so let's kind of talk about that a little bit.
Well, I just like to say that, you know, I've looked at this whole pandemic and look at the role that, you know, our Black sisters has been throughout this country. And I don't agree with Farrakhan definitely in that, with my experience, you know, it's time for us as men to step up and take, you know, and help out with the situation. You know, we look at every statistic, you know, that affects our sisters. You know, it needs to be addressed, but also too, I think it's time for us as men to properly to protect and respect our own women. You know, a lot of things we see sister-wise is we as brothers, we as us as Black men, we do our own injury to our sisters. And then we look at the systems that continue to do the injury. So what do they rely to? So we have to hold ourselves more accountable as Black men to protect our mothers, our wives, our girlfriends, our daughters, our nieces. We have to do a better job. That's the thing I like to advocate for, is holding us men as accountable. And one of the things we have to understand that, you know, most men have to understand, sisters, that how much sexism and male chauvinism has affected our community, and we can't be in denial of that. You know what I'm saying? So those are things that where we're coming from, is to allow women to take their rightful place. And their rightful place is with God, of course. But when we thinking that women just are like a tool and something to play with, I think that's what we see with these statistics in our community.
Definitely.
I would definitely agree with Brother Muhammad. However, I think it's more so we as a Black community need to stick together and protect each other, not necessarily Black men or Black women differently or separately, but us as a unit need to come together, protect each other, and acknowledge some of the struggles that we as a unit go through and how we as a unit can move forward.
Yes, ma'am.
Certainly.
Yeah, and I would add, I think, you know, the pandemic itself, I think these are things that we knew. We knew that unemployment for Black women was, you know, on average higher, right? We knew that the maternal mortality rate and the Black infant mortality rate on average is about 4 times higher, right? Like, these are things that we knew. I think the pandemic itself has really highlighted, particularly for Black folks, that our mental health is important, right? And so, you know, I think the pandemic, it just shined a brighter light on the issues that were already plaguing, those social issues that were already plaguing our community. And I'm glad that we are talking about it more now than we did before, right? But research has been out there saying we're dying at 4 times the rate of white women in labor, right? Something that's so natural, something that happens every day. People give birth every day. Why are we dying at 4 times the rate? We've known for quite some time that, you know, Black women on average, we're not making the money that our counterparts are making, white women and white men, right? And for doing the same job, right? And on average, we're more educated. So let's also take that into account as well. So we can be more educated and still not making income wise, the same as our counterparts. So I think that what the pandemic has illuminated for a lot of people, unfortunately, is that this can happen to anybody, right? A lot of us are a paycheck away, right, from being homeless, or a pandemic away from being homeless, or being laid off, or whatever the case is. And so I think now that a vast majority of people have been impacted negatively in a way, right? Now that's allowing for folks to understand and be more empathetic, right, towards others, to say, well, this has been happening, right? This has been going on. So if I'm in a position where I've lost my job and I know, like, it's hard for me, imagine what that must be like for the Black community, who on average has higher unemployment rates, or on average was not making as much as we were making in general, or on average they're dying more than we are. So it's very unfortunate, but I think that it has generated a lot of conversations that we were having like this, right? But now they're more on a larger scale, where they deserve to be anyway, right? It wasn't really supposed to be a side conversation anyway. It's supposed to be on a large screen, and we're supposed to be talking about this anyway.
Absolutely. I feel that what you're saying is so true, because for so long we have been screaming our cries of, we need help, we need assistance, we need understanding, we need respect, we need resources, and we need the shift to take place within our culture that allows that to happen. But for so often that scream is stifled, and it's covered up with everything else under the sun, and all these other things take precedent. And I think, like you said, this time has really given us the individual time to reflect, to be at home and to actually recognize, wow, I'm spending time with my family. That's not normal. I have allowed capitalism and society and the need to get a check so that I can pay bills, because the cost of living and what I get paid are two different things. And so we're neglecting our areas of our home, our family, our lives, our personal lives, all these things that are happening. And so having, that time to reflect is definitely bringing to attention areas where I have not been taking care of self in the way that I should, and I haven't necessarily been investing in my own growth and my own family and my own things as much as I've been investing in the outside world. And I think that aspect of community that Ashley mentioned is so important, because when we do not have that vision as a community to be able to, take principles like that of the Nguzo Saba, if you follow Kwanzaa, right? Taking principles like Umoja, being unified together, or the self-determination, and taking the time to take on one another's problems as our own and work through those together and provide resources for one another and invest back into our own communities. That aspect has been missing for so long because of how we're kind of forced into this work mindset. And I think when we talk about some of the transition that's taken place during the pandemic, there's been a lot of aha moments of, this is not healthy. Did you have any personal moments of, I need to have some more healthy lifestyle habits? I know for me, as a psychology professor and someone in psychology, you would think that I have that on lock, right? And I own my own self-care business, and you would think like, okay, she takes care of herself. That's what she's all about. But even I had to step back and say, like, good grief, I've been working crazy hours. I've been putting all my efforts into all of these different things. And although there may be positive things that I'm pouring into, I am drained. And I am not refilling my cup the way I should. Did anybody else have that experience?
I definitely did. And I think it came to a head at the start of the pandemic. Working several different jobs before the pandemic hit, it kind of come to a halt, when the pandemic hit, because of, jobs being laid off, or hours being cut for different reasons and things like that. So I began to realize I was on that go, forced into that work mindset, that I wasn't taking care of myself, that I wasn't making time for me. And it wasn't until the pandemic hit that I realized I don't have anything to do. Am I depressed? What is going on with me? And a lot of times people think, oh, you're a therapist, you can't be depressed, or you can't have mental health, or whatever the case may be, which that's not true. therapists have therapists, and therapists need therapy because we go through our own stuff. So that was one thing that I most definitely did for myself, was seeked out therapy. I started to spend more time with my 3-year-old, and just taking that time to cherish her, because she's not going to be this size forever. You know, she's growing so much and so quickly that I had to just take time to be with her. And just in those moments, I learned I was missing out on time with her. I was missing out on just that peace inside of myself because I was so on the go. So I think that was what the pandemic brought to me, was slow down.
Yeah, the pandemic was like, hold up, girl, you're doing a lot. Okay. So, for me, the slowing down was essential. Starting just even last year, from a business perspective, things really picked up. And of course, wanting to serve and wanting to make sure that folks' needs are met, I definitely took on a lot and added to our team and all of that. But I think for me, it hit me when I got sick, and not due to COVID, but I got sick and had to get a root canal. And I had to literally stop myself and force myself to take off. And I was like, okay, this is a lot. So that really forced me to slow down and to just recognize, I'm going to help. I'm going to help as much as I can help. I'm going to try to, position my team to be able to help as well. But I need to, if I need to take a break, I need to take a break. And it's okay for me to take care of myself. Otherwise, I will not be in a position to help take care of my clients and to be support for them. And that was a really big turning point for me. And so since then, I decided I was going to slow down on, I was teaching and I was just doing all these other things. So I kind of just was slowly but surely letting go of things that I really do enjoy doing, but feel like the time will come back. I'll be able to do that at another time. And right now is not, the best time for that. And so really having to prioritize is a really big piece of that. And just like Ashley said, starting therapy, realizing I'm under stress, and it's not something that's foreign to me. I've been in therapy before and have stopped, and you get good and you're like, okay, I'm all right for a minute. But when the pandemic hit, I was like, I need some support for myself as well. So, and then being intentional about taking vacation, and unplugging. So that's where it brought me.
Well, for me, during the pandemic, it was both a positive and a negative. I mean, one of the positive things I did, I got transferred to a job that I really wanted, and as employment was going on, I didn't have that. But the self-care of trying to take care of everybody, trying to get people back in the job and counseling them, that was overwhelming. So, like you said, having self-care was very important. I mean, we as clinicians got to understand, we can't help nobody until we help ourselves. For me, it starts with the relationship with God first, me, getting back to what I need to do first. But for me, during the pandemic, it was a blessing because of the fact it really showed me how important family were, how important the little small things were that we took advantage for. I mean, if you look at it, just going out to a grocery store without a mask and, going around your family, not couldn't see your families anymore. That was a big wear and tear on me and some of my family members. But the question is the pandemic showed me that definitely, how much we have took for granted. And then, doing that self-care, doing better for yourself too. So that's what I experienced there during this whole pandemic.
Absolutely. And I feel like in this experience, there was a lot of cracks in the foundation exposed, right? We had individuals coming home to work where they had to take care of their children, and be in the home, taking care of the home, and making the money to take care of the bills, and taking care of other family members. And I think especially for the role of the Black woman, that's a very strenuous role. It's almost as if you can't depend on anyone else, or you don't expect that you can depend on anyone else, because for forever history has always pushed that we have to be the ones to carry through, or to carry on, or to hold the burden, or to take charge. And quite honestly, there are a lot of responsibilities that the women seem to be, taking on, or having to take on more often than the men. And so I was seeing the rates of relationships and the dynamics of relationships shifting during the quarantine, because now both parties may be at home and maybe working, but the woman is still being expected to do the household duties, or these gender roles are expected to be maintained, or the taking care of the children, and just all these things kind of compounded on one another. And it made it very, very difficult for some to even maintain their relationships, and the strain that was there. And I think back to mammyism is how women have always, as Black women, been kind of forced into this nurturer role and expected to take care of everything and everyone without a thought to taking care of herself. And then when we look at, the Constitution, for example, we see the cracks exposed in the amendments of the Constitution, where it basically dictated that people of color should not be in the household together, taking care of things together and handling things together, that it would be more beneficial for you to be the mother at home with your children on your own, because you can get more resources that way, or that the men were pushed out of the home with the women from, long time ago until now. And of course, we're going to get into some of that in a little bit later, but I'm just thinking a little bit about the additional strain on the Black woman during this time. But before we continue the conversation, we want to welcome Brother Ernist. We want to welcome you back in and allow you to introduce yourself and share with us a little bit about your thoughts about how the pandemic has revealed the conditions of the Black woman today.
Greetings, everyone. Happy to be in, and I'm Ernest Muhammad. I studied science of Dianetics, and I studied to the point where I got a gold seal, and it helps to relieve engrams, and engrams are moments of time of pain that we suffered when we were growing. If somebody call you stupid or big head, that's one thing, and it would cause an emotional lock. But an engram is when somebody call you stupid or dummy and then slap you upside the head at the same time. That moment right there just locks you into thinking that you're stupid or a dummy. And so my that's what I had studied for years when I was in Florence, Kentucky. And I wanted to make a point from the book called Science of Survival. And it makes reference to men, but it talks about the power of the woman. And especially now during this pandemic where communication is key, I'll just go ahead and read. It's just a part, and it's on page 137 of Science of Survival. The fourth chapter is sexual behavior, attitude toward children, and of course we're dealing with the effects of the Black woman. It says, if man is to rise to greater heights, then woman must rise with him, or even before him. But she must rise as woman, and not as today she is being misled into rising as a man. It is the hideous joke of frustrated, unreviled men to make women over into the travesty of men, which men themselves have become. So the compliment is to the strength and the power of the Black woman, where she stands firm, where she not only takes abuse from a uncultured man, but she goes into even helping him with her high tolerance and high patience to become more of that which he could be. So this Corona time is the time where we were to go into our own compartments. And for married couples, And for couples that are in relationships where they are in a process to be married, there's closeness. So the woman is so valuable in handling family, children, husband, man, and without her, the nation would fall. And as we say, the nation can rise no higher than its woman. And the Black woman, being the original woman, is key.
Ooh, say that again. Say key. The Black woman is key. That's what I'm talking about. I mean, we don't talk about it enough. You know, we hear about the plight of the Black man, and we know how difficult it is for the Black man. And I think sometimes we tend to forget to talk about the Black woman and the issues that the Black woman faces as well, and how we need to empower the Black woman just as much as we need to empower the Black man, because the Black woman is going to give birth to the Black children. So if we want to empower the Black community, we first must pour into she who is birthing the community, right? And so I think that is a very, very strong factor. And I think when we talk about that factor, again, back to the healthcare of the Black woman, that is one of the areas that we do not speak on enough. Even I went through my own personal experience. You know, I had 7 years with a Black female doctor and thought because she was Black and because she was a woman that she would understand my pain, she would hear me when I said that I was in pain, and that she would work with me to handle the needs that I had. And unfortunately, just because someone is your skinfolk don't mean that they're your kinfolk. And that doesn't mean that everybody is like that. But the reality is, who educated that Black woman? Who gave her the textbooks? Who taught her medicine? Who taught her what signs to be looking for and how to treat patients? And if that is a whitewashed curriculum, which it all is, reality, hello, it all is, because people still don't want to admit that Africa is the birthplace of civilization. Hello? Okay, so if we still have these whitewashed curriculums, we still have bias embedded into the foundations of these practices, then we're still allowing people to, you know, maybe, yeah, they can come in and you could bring the right people in, but they're still being given the wrong information. And so my doctor did not hear me for 7 years, y'all. 7 years that I was going through painful experiences and going through the issues that I had, and even asking about the condition that I thought that I might possibly be suffering from, and still not being heard. And, you know, when your doctor has been on Oprah, you thought that, you know, you've hit the jackpot here. And it wasn't until I got a second opinion from a male who happened to be Indian, not even Black, I recognized how easily our own people can be misled and misinformed and manipulated into following the racially discriminatory practices that have been we've been experiencing since slavery. And so I was diagnosed with endometriosis in January. I had surgery and found that I am at stage 4 already. That being unheard for so long has led me to this place. But in reality, this condition is a condition that 1 in 10 women experience. But especially in the Black community, when you're told, oh, it's cramps, get over it. You still have to go to school. You still have to go to work. Just deal with it. This is what women go through. Oh, you'll be all right. Women issues and all these other things that kind of just stifled the scream and the conversation. You learn to take pain. You learn to deal with it. And so, yes, my pain looked very different because I've been in pain for 15 years. So why would I be falling out and crying and screaming and hollering? And so, yes, my pain is different. And I think a lot of Black women have similar experiences where they go to the emergency room, go to the doctor, and they're not heard. And then we also have the lack of support and resources and education about options that are out there. Who knew that Five Rivers is out here willing to take you if you have no insurance, and willing to work on a sliding scale and give you right here in the Dayton community roundabout services from, you know, parenting classes on down if you just go. But we don't know about these resources. So what are some of your thoughts and experiences about healthcare in Black women particularly, and how the lack of education plays a role in that?
Well, my thing, Taylor, is that, you know, the healthcare industry, if we've been honest about ourselves in this country, the health industry has never had the Black woman's best interest in mind. That's why we have to do for self and, have that. But I think that what you're talking about with the sister, not having the knowledge of self, not having the conscious, and what happens with that is the person themselves who are Black don't have a love for self. So, but the healthcare industry in this country as a whole has not given us the best healthcare. They have used our Black sisters from experiment. We know about what's going on in the North Carolina. We know about South Carolina. They've been used as guinea pigs. And so this mentality to me, is still going on today. There's a lot of talk about what's going on right now with the experiment, we believe with the vaccinations. And that same mentality is still going on. So there's been a lot of things that the Black woman has been experimented with because, like you said, she can endure the pain. She's a guinea pig. And so, but we have to, with the knowledge we have now, I think this is the best time for those of us who are in this field is to advocate what's best for us as a people and advocate for our sisters that, hey, you're not going to do this. And we have to stand up. We have the knowledge now. We got a lot of us in this field. We have a lot of us in the medical field, but we cannot go along with what we done years ago because we have a title or we have a position. We have to stand up and find out what's right, and truth and righteousness.
Yeah, it's important for us to advocate for ourselves. And one thing that I have learned is just in seeing, a host of different folks and then knowing folks that have been through medical school and graduated and they're doing residencies and all these different things, is a lot of this stuff is not even being dispelled even in the medical schools, even now in 2021 or 2020, 2019, 2018, whatever, it's still not being dispelled. And so you have folks that believe that Black women, Black people don't experience pain the same way. You'll have students that, will say that. And really recognizing that we are up against, a lot when we're trying to advocate for ourselves. But it's really important for us to speak up. It's important for us to ask the things that we've asked in, a meeting with our doctor or nurse practitioner or whomever. Document that in the chart. Okay. Because if anything happens to me, document that in the chart that I asked you about X, Y, and Z. And just making sure that we're, when our stuff is dismissed, taking that next step and saying, okay, well, I need to escalate this to the next person, or I need a second opinion, or I need to, speak with someone who maybe has more experience in this area, and, and going from there, because sometimes it will force people to take another look at whatever it is that whatever our issue is. But we have to remember, just like you said, Professor Taylor, is that, the system, the things that are being taught, we're learning it too. We're learning it as we come out, and it takes a process of unlearning. And, my hope is that, practitioners that look like us are doing that work to unlearn and to dispel myths and to do that. But, also recognizing that they're also up against this, medical industrial complex system, right? They're also a part of that as well. But hopefully they will take the time to learn and to unlearn the things that need to be unlearned so that, we can all get the help that we need. But, the advocacy part is really, really big. And if something is not right for you or not feeling right, keep asking and keep asking and keep asking, make them document it, make them because then they have to be accountable for it, because that's the other piece too, is typically there's no accountability, right? So, we have to, hold people accountable, hold them to the fire. And so when they're not addressing our concerns, and I know, not everybody's going to be as blunt or as forthcoming as I am, but saying, that's not what I was asking about. I asked you about X, Y, and Z. This is what I'm telling you I'm experiencing. I need you to document what I've said, right? And, if you need to get a record of that, get that too.
That's
so,
right.
We have access. we have access to our records. We are entitled to our medical records, right? So recognizing, like, yes, it is a big system, right, that plays a role in all that, but we can navigate that system. We shouldn't have to, but we can. And there are ways to do that. And so when you're feeling like you're not being heard, because it can have a detrimental outcome, right? And so we want to make sure at the end of the day, we've done our due diligence. And if that doctor or nurse or whomever is not doing what they're supposed to be doing, that we're doing our part to hold them also accountable for that as well.
That's right. Hold them accountable, advocate for yourself, get a second opinion, and do what you need to do to take your own healthcare into your own hands. Again, you're watching Knowledge Cypher. We are talking about the unconquerable nature of the Black woman. We're going to go to a commercial, but stick around with us. We're going to dive a little bit deeper into these topics.
You say slavery's frontier was a white man's sexual playground.
Yeah. Those are strong statements, but I also think that they're true.
It was at the auctions where African families were split apart. Husbands, wives, and children went to different owners. Many never saw each other again. No event was more traumatic in the lives of enslaved people than the forcible separation from their families.
Even on the plantation, for what I understand is that young white boys would go to the slave quarters when he come of age and got ready to engage in sex, and he would go down and pick him out a woman to have sex with, and even to have children with if necessary. It was just common here in the South.
Households. Breastfeeding constituted another form of labor that slave owners required enslaved women to perform. For Warren Taylor's mother, for example, nursing white children was one of her primary jobs.
The 1830s also marked the beginning of recorded experimentation on Black women's bodies. One doctor performed experimental C-sections on slaves. Another one perfected the dangerous ovariotomy, or removal of an ovary by testing the procedure on slave women. In fact, half the original articles in the 1836 Southern Medical and Surgical Journal dealt with experiments on Black people.
The success of James Marion Sims earned him the nickname of the father of modern gynecology. But his legacy is marred by the fact he earned it on the backs of Black slaves through non-consensual human experimentation without anesthesia.
So you are watching Knowledge Cypher. We are talking about the unconquerable nature of the Black woman. And that clip that you might have joined us on is just unpacking the history of slavery into Jim Crow and the Reconstruction era into civil rights into now, and the experience of the Black woman's body being the playground of the white slave master and of those experimenting in science and medicine. We can talk about many different aspects of this. First and foremost, we can talk about the experience of Black women being enslaved, the experience of them being used, their bodies being used as breeding grounds for more children to be enslaved, to be sold from their bodies right into the hands of someone else. We're looking at the experience of a mother losing her children, the experience of a wife losing her husband, the experience of a woman being separated from her family, and then her body being used, and the amount of trauma that comes along with that. And as a survivor of domestic violence, I can surely speak to the experience of trauma that carries within the body over the years after going through any type of traumatic experience, but especially that of the Black woman and the experience of not having any real safety there. And so always being on guard, always carrying yourself in such a way that gets you labeled as aggressive and gets you labeled as mean and the other words that people like to use in reference to us. But when we look at that experience, we see so many different things, even to being put on display and traveled around Europe. They call her Sarah Bartigay now. That was not her given name, but being toured, her body physically being toured around Europe as a part of a circus act where she was physically molested, groped, and touched naked in front of a crowd, by the crowd. And then even to 1958 in Belgium, having us still as zoo exhibits, our Black women and Black children as zoo exhibits. And then, of course, the father of modern gynecology and the many other experiments, as mentioned earlier, that have taken place on the Black woman's body especially. I mean, let's just talk about the experience and how those traumas kind of carry. Some people have heard of the term post-slave, right? And looking at that experience of trauma post-slave trauma, right? And experiencing that. But racial trauma is certainly carried. We talk about cellular memory and how we're kind of teaching our next generations to maintain this experience of trauma and have the instinct and the survival skills to deal with it. So let's talk about that a little bit.
Well, the trauma, Sister Taylor, is very dear. I got a story of my own biological mother. I don't know if you guys remember Emmett Till. She was a young lady in the South at that time, seeing images of his body being brutal. She had another trauma experience when she was in the South. She was sitting at the counter because she was a young lady from the North, and my great grandmother pulled her off the counter because she didn't know any better. And that trauma has followed my mom for a while. And there's other trauma things that our women have been through. And I think and it's been in our community, though, sisters and brothers, that we don't talk about these traumas experiences that we have, especially Black women. But it does detrimental not only just to her, but detrimental to her children, to her grandchildren. And we don't want to talk about that because we've been told in this country we should deal with it. Slavery is something of the past. But now we can definitely see how trauma can go from generation to generation. And a lot of young ladies come out their mother's womb, and men don't know why we think the way we think. We don't know why we do what we do, because that trauma is passed down from generation to generation. And we're taught, don't talk about it. I don't know if you got family from Alabama. There was a thing called, I think it was a town in Alabama where it was being bombed before the church bombing happened with the young sisters in the church. Black people from the South were told to come north, don't even mention it. Okay, so that type of trauma experience with Black women and Black men, particularly Black women, have given. We have some unfinished trauma from our grandparents, our parents, and then we want to know why we act the way we act, because it hasn't been dealt with. And so I always say, for us in our generation now, we have so much knowledge, we have so much information, and I'm glad seeing this panel is for us now, our generation, our children's generation now, to get this out to be talked about. You're not weak. You're not, anything that we've been saying for former generation. Let's get this out and let's talk about it with a solution.
So I took a class a while back, and it was Joy DeGroo's class, who developed the post-traumatic slave syndrome, the theory, right? And so she talked about how, like you said, on a cellular level, that trauma is passed on. And one of the things that she pinpointed that I thought was just crazy was that there had been research done on Holocaust victims, right? Holocaust survivors. And there had been research done on Japanese internment camp survivors. And it looked at how, how they changed, right, from generation to generation. And it was enough, research that was done to show, like, there was a change in the DNA, right, like as you pass down, right, as we know, like there have been forms of reparation for folks that fall up under that category. And so one of the glaring things that stood out to me is she said there's been no reparation. So our trauma has just been it's been chronic, right? So you're talking about slavery, you're talking about Reconstruction, you're talking about Jim Crow, you're talking about the Civil Rights era, and you're talking about like brutal, acts of terrorism, right? Not even like somebody was just mean to me, but like we gonna kill your family, right? Or we're gonna snatch your baby away, right? Or we're forcing non-consenting folks to breed, right? We're utilizing you as a means of breeding, right? And so, but there had been no reparation. And so if we look at us today, like, we know that when people don't work on their trauma and when people don't handle that kind of stuff, it leaves lasting effects, right? And so for women, what that looks like is how we parent our kids, right? We love our kids. But we parent our kids from a place of fear, because that's the difference between if if I can tell you, and this doesn't, and I'm not making excuses for verbal and physical abuse or anything like that, but what that looks like for a lot of parents is, I'm gonna get you right and make sure you do right in here, so that when you go out there, they can get you right. And so that looks like parenting from, like, with this overwhelming anxiety, which anybody that has had anxiety or dealt with anxiety, it does not feel good in your body. But imagine parenting your child from that point, where it, comes down to, like, now we're laying hands on our kids, or we're talking down to our kids, because if we can keep them safe, if we can keep them in this box, then they're safe, right? So, for women having that, instinct to protect, that's what that looks like. And that's just one example, but also, it impacts our relationships, right? Not just like Brother Muhammad said, like, not knowing how to have conversations, not knowing how to communicate different things, because we've been told to keep it in a box, right? So how does, a mom or a sister or daughter tell you that something is happening if you don't practice communication, if you don't practice learning how to speak what's happening to us? So it looks, trauma, it takes on many different forms, and how it comes out in our behaviors and interactions with each other. And women, we take on a lot of that, unfortunately. So yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. To the other panelists, how do you think trauma is showing up in because I know that, for our audience watching, a lot of times trauma is not necessarily something you identify right away. Like, you don't necessarily realize, like, oh, that's from trauma. Like, sometimes, and I know for me, it took me a long time to be able to start recognizing when I was being triggered, and recognize why I was being triggered, and say, this is what's happening, and I'm understanding what's happening. So how do you feel trauma may show up in behavior, especially within the Black community, and especially for the Black woman?
So on the emotions of our children growing into adults, where unity and cooperative working together are necessary in order for us to, as a group of people, as a family of people, as a nation of people, come up out of the condition in which we're in. We've had statements that cause emotional locks on us, that are like, "Shut up," and that's the overt expression. But then there's some covert expression that be like, it comes in the form of a whisper. Don't speak out too much. Don't say too much. Don't cause any trouble. And so back to the family structure. The mother, in the Nation of Islam, we say a nation can rise no higher than its woman. So the mother is key in rearing, developing our children. Of course, she's a key that is a positive with a negative, which makes it work like electricity. I'm not calling the man negative, but I'm in this particular instance, where we're talking about the value of the Black woman in these trying times, her being the teacher, the key teacher the master scientist. You know, she gets in the kitchen and she makes good meals so that you know, if your eyesight is like get a little bad, you'll be able, here, let me put a few extra carrots in your on your plate tonight. So it's important that it's really important that the women are heard, and that the children are encouraged to at least raise their hand one time out of every meeting that they're in to give their opinion, so that their self-value, their self-worth can continue to be strong and grow.
I definitely agree. I think that both you and Sister Ashley made a very significant point, which is that it tends to continue on. It is expressed in our behavior, or it's picked up on in our behavior and then passed on to our children. And so you know, I have to be the protector, you know, I have to be strong, I have to be resilient, I have to continue on even though the weight of the world is on my shoulders type of experience that the Black woman has does tend to show in her, you know, I don't take the mess demeanor, right? And that's how people would look and say, well, if you don't take any mess, you're speaking out, you're being direct, or you're you know, being very vocal about anything. Now you're the aggressive Black woman, and that's what Sister Ashley was saying. And what you said, it then comes out when we're telling someone else, shut up, right? It's really that you need to be quiet before it becomes a situation, right? But it's that protective, you know, let me get you before they get you type of experience that we tend to have. And it weighs on us. It weighs on us in ways unthinkable. For one example is we don't even have the freedom to truly be who we were created to be, because the society tells us that we're not allowed, that us being our natural selves, us talking in our natural voices, us speaking in our dialect, us wearing our natural hair, all of these things are politicized. They're used against us. They're used to paint us as inferior or savage, or to disconnect us from status and prestige. And they're used against us to think that the way that my hair grows out of my head naturally is considered unprofessional or offensive even to some other person is like wild and beyond me. And so looking at those experiences is very important. But as we look at, you know, these experiences, it is, again, very, very, very continuous, because it's passed on, it's passed down. You're told to move a certain way, to talk a certain way, to be a certain way. I did an interview yesterday, and someone asked me, you know, are you a different person in the classroom than you are on stage? And I said, absolutely. Not that I take on a different personality or a different persona. I'm not, you know, one of those people. But what does happen is I have the freedom now to truly express myself in my fashion, in the way that I speak, in the way that I sing, in the words that I say, in the message that I give. And it is going to come from my heart. It is going to come from my spirit. It is going to have things that I may not freely be able to do in the classroom, because if I do, then I'm going to be treated a certain way, looked at a certain way. I'm already a target. Good grief. You know, what more do you need? You got, you know, Black, and you got Afro, and you're young, and you're in all the Black stuff. It already puts you into a situation where they're already looking at you as if they're waiting for a reason. They're waiting for a reason to say something or to target you. And I think in the workplace, especially, that's an area that we're seeing Black women truly struggle when it comes to their experience in the workplace and being respected in the workplace. I would love to hear your thoughts on workplace environment and how toxic workplace environment plays a role in that trauma as well. Brother, I think you're still on mute.
Apologize, family. Sorry about that. I want to make sure I like listening more than speaking, but and just what you've everyone said on the panel so far, you, Sister Taylor, Brother Ernest, and Sister Asia, all have made some great points here. I just think that, what you've been saying, Sister Taylor, I just think overall, we have to just understand that no matter what we do or what we say or how we look, we're just from the society of white supremacy, our very existence is sometimes just an issue for them. I think they know of the history of our traumatic experience here. They know about racism and Jim Crow. And I think they know from, I'm going to get spiritual here, from the creative standpoint, that you cannot continue to oppress a people and make laws and do people wrong until justice is going to render itself. So I think just what we see, I think, like you said, in the workplace environment, I've talked to a lot of sisters in counseling. They cannot be themselves. They're set up to fail. They got to be able to toe the line because they don't want to lose the job because they got responsibilities. A lot of our sisters are single parents. They're not getting help from us as the fathers or the husbands. So that put a lot of pressure on them on how they got to sometimes smile, listen to sexual jokes that's not funny, listen to racial jokes that are not funny, which creates more trauma. And they have to bring that on to the house. And usually, not all the times, the young children are going to get the brunt of that in some ways, or there's going to be a disconnect where she's not going to relate to her family very well. I am dealing with a young lady like that, counseling a young lady like that right now, where she's going through a lot of stuff at the job, racial stuff because of Trump, what's going on in society when you're the only Black woman there, and it's though that you got to speak for all Black people. That type of experience has been put on Black women. So, we going through counseling techniques of showing her, let her know that you don't have to take ownership of that. You're not the advocate and stuff like that. But it's a lot of Black women who go through that on the job. They have to toe the line because they have so much responsibility taking care of the children by themselves. And that's why I said earlier that some sisters that, we as brothers and men in our community, Black men, we also got to take responsibility of the trauma we give to our own Black sisters. And we got to change ourselves first to stop the trauma. Because a lot of the trauma of our Black sisters does from the workplaces because we're not helping out in the business.
At the home, we can't necessarily talk about the trauma because what happens at home must stay in the home Black community. A lot of times that is the rhetoric, and that was because you couldn't address issues in slavery. You couldn't address issues about what's happening in the home or what's happening with you because there was nobody that had your back. There was nobody that was going to support you, and you had to support one another, and you had to keep it to yourself because if you take it to anyone else, it could now put your family in danger. If there was a conflict between a husband and a wife, if you talk about it outside of here, it will put your family in danger. If you have a conflict with your children, right? If the children are acting up, you keep it in the home because if master finds out, that could be that child's life in danger. And so from then on, we've had this whole experience of you have to keep things within house, keep it in the family, keep it within the community, and you can't talk about it. And so a lot of times that unresolved issues or all of the issues that are taking place, like they are being compiled and compounded upon within you. And what happens when you have something bubbling up inside of a confined space? It's going to explode at some point in time. And so it shows up as anger. Sometimes it shows up as depression. And Sister Ashley has been texting me this information, so this is coming from her. It might show up as depression, right? And I can attest to what that might look like for the busy Black woman who's used to taking on the world. It might look like, I don't feel like cleaning my house today, so this room is just going to look a mess, and oh well. It might look like we just going to eat out for the whole week, and I'm sorry that we're door dashing all week, but I just cannot bring myself to do anything beyond that, right? It might look like I'm going to work and I'm going through the motions, but deep down inside, I do not want to get out of bed and I don't feel like doing anything. Stop talking to me, right? Like that is a lot of times how it shows up, and then it shows up in anxiety in other areas. And so over the last year, racial trauma has become a topic that people are willing to discuss discussed now. It is we're recognizing it as a separate form of trauma that exists in the Black community and that impacts the Black community. And in that, one of the things that I've learned is that people start to feel the pressure of taking on the emotional labor to deal with these environments, to deal with the racism of society. And as was mentioned before, they end up being the spokesperson for the Black people. And now they feel the need or the responsibility, or everyone is looking at them as the go-to person. I am not going to lie to you. I have been called on the phone from someone who said, I'm working on my my finals for my project, and I have a client, they're a psychology student. I have a client who's a Black woman, and I just needed to ask you some questions. We're expected to have that monolithic experience where we've all been through the same thing and we can speak for everybody. And although we have a lot of the same experiences, it's not always experienced in the same way. And people have different experiences as well. And not everybody knows where their experiences come from. We all might have been told to be in the house by the time the street lights came on, but we may not have been told that came from sundown town practices and the fact that you would be killed as a Black person if you were caught in this area after dark, right? So again, just the experiences of Black women are challenged by society. And so I want to encourage you, if you're listening, that when you are dealing with trauma as a Black person, or you're dealing with something that's triggering, you're dealing with a racial experience or a discriminatory experience or microaggression, one thing you can do that doesn't require a lot of effort is to make the invisible visible. Okay, whether that's at the doctor's office, whether that's in the classroom, whether that's on the job, make the invisible visible. If they start telling you how much they enjoyed that new Beyonce video, that's when you say, why did you think I like Beyonce, right? When they are not listening to you at the doctor, as Sister Deasia said earlier, this is when you say, well, can you mark it in my chart that I asked about this and you wouldn't look into it? This is when you do those little things to make the invisible visible. And there you have a choice to stop. If you want, you can take on the emotional labor of explaining and then tell them how to educate themselves, but it is not your responsibility. We have to take the time to put ourselves first, put on your own oxygen mask before you try to help somebody else. This is the time where we have to recognize that the conflict within is to overcome the things of society and the things that we've internalized and that we've accepted as our reality. And we have to seek truth for ourselves and take the time to use the knowledge and truth and knowledge of self to be better people for ourselves, for our community, and for our nation. I want to say this, as Brother Ernest said so eloquently earlier: a nation can rise no higher than the woman. We are the mother. We are the birth. We are the birthplace. And so we must respect and take care of our women. And so we challenge you to make sure that you put the Black woman in the forefront of your mind this week, and how can you support your Black women in your community. And thank you again for tuning in with us. You can join us every fourth Wednesday of the month at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. This is Knowledge Cypher. Please be sure to like and subscribe and hit the notification.
And you can also continue this discussion on our Facebook group, which is Knowledge Cypher. And you'll get information about the series and then the different platforms that we do this on. And we hope that you will join us. And just to one thing that I would want to take away from this, to kind of give folks a practical thing to kind of take away, is to, it's really important to spend reflective time with yourself. Learn yourself. You have to learn about yourself to understand your triggers, to understand your trauma, and that takes work. It can be done through therapy, but there are other ways of knowing and learning yourself. You can do it in community as well. And so that's a really important first step to just healing and overcoming the trauma that we've been dealing with.
Well, I think, like Brother Ernest mentioned, that what we've learned, that the fact no nation can rise higher than a woman. And so the fact is that I'll leave for us today as a Black community, especially coming teaching from our teachers, Louis Farrakhan, that we have to name and define for ourselves, brothers and sisters. We have to protect and respect each other first. So I'm just asking for all of us, as particularly Black women and particularly Black men, that we have to protect our daughters, our wives, our mothers, and we have to continue to do better for them. And like I said, get involved, advocate for our children, advocate for our women. I think this is the best time now, what's going on in this country, that we have to stand up and advocate and do for ourselves. For those of us in the clinician, if you know we've seen things that's wrong in our education system that's anti-Black or anti-woman, we must speak up. And then the first thing for the solution is that we have God on our side to protect us, and we will see and be victorious when victory is won.
Please support Knowledge Cypher by joining our Patreon site or make a donation through our PayPal or our Cash App, and follow us on our other social media platforms. Our links are in the description below. Thank you again for joining us. We are so glad that you've been here with us. We look forward to the next time we can have another Knowledge Cypher and break down more information about how our community can be empowered. And may God bless you and your family with the light of truth and understanding.
I believe that I do take so much energy, so much work from heart, spirit, and creativity that I have to be responsible enough to take care of me, because you know what happens? Imbalance comes, and you know what happens? I look to you, Willow, and I say, Willow, you've got to do this, because if you don't, you become, I start looking towards you. I start making you responsible for my happiness. And a lot of times, you know what we do? We look to our men, we look to our husbands and our boyfriends, and we go, I've given all this up for you, and you've got to make this right by me, and you're supposed to make me happy. Because we've lost our way on how to make ourselves happy. We lost our way. So what I had to do and what I had to learn was how to get more balance. And over the years, each year, each day, I get more and more and more and more in balance.
Now, if you notice, I have around me tonight sisters. I want to send a message to the entire world that the world is in the condition that is in because the world disrespects women. The world is headed into hell because the world disrespects womanhood. When man denies woman, he denies a part of his own nature that gives him balance. This is why the world is messed up today. You have denied woman, and you have denied the quality of mercy in your own self. So I have sisters around me to say to the whole world, the woman must play an important part in the development of the nation, or the nation will go to hell.